In the popular imagination, the medieval knight stands polished and unburdened, his armor gleaming beneath banners, his loyalty unquestioned, his honor intact. He is remembered as a figure of clarity in a violent age, a man bound by oath, guided by chivalry, rewarded with land, status, and glory. But this image, so carefully preserved in later literature and modern media, conceals a reality far less stable and far more costly. To become a knight in medieval Europe was not merely to adopt a code of conduct or a martial identity. It was to enter an economic condition defined by relentless expenditure, fragile income, inherited obligation, and constant risk of financial collapse. Knighthood was not a reward granted at the end of hardship. It was a lifelong investment that rarely paid itself back. Before a sword was raised in battle, before a vow was sworn, the cost had already begun to accumulate, quietly, relentlessly, and often irreversibly. A knight was expected to look like a knight at all times, not only on the battlefield, but in court, in procession, in travel, and even at rest. Armor was not a single purchase, but a continual series of replacements, repairs, and upgrades. Mail shirts tore and rusted. Plate armor cracked under stress and had to be reforged. Helmets were lost, damaged, or rendered obsolete by changes in warfare. By the late 13th and 14th centuries, a full harness of plate could cost the equivalent of several years' income for a modest landholder, and even earlier, mail armor represented a major financial burden. These were not optional expenses. To appear inadequately equipped was to invite ridicule, suspicion, or exclusion. A poorly armed knight was not simply ineffective, he was dishonorable by appearance alone. Yet armor was only the beginning. A knight required horses, and not merely one. Warhorses, destriers, were expensive, difficult to train, and alarmingly fragile in combat. They were trained to charge into noise, blood, and chaos, and many did not survive their first campaign. In addition to the primary warhorse, a knight needed riding horses, pack animals, and replacements ready at all times. Medieval records repeatedly show knights borrowing money or pledging land to replace horses lost not in battle, but to disease, exhaustion, or theft. The death of a horse could be financially catastrophic, not because it ended a campaign, but because it erased years of accumulated investment in a single moment. Weapons, too, demanded constant upkeep. Swords required skilled smiths to repair chips and cracks. Lances shattered with use. Shields splintered and had to be repainted and reinforced, often bearing heraldic symbols that themselves required maintenance to remain legible and respectable. Beyond equipment, a knight was expected to maintain a retinue. Even a minor knight rarely traveled alone. Squires, servants, grooms, and retainers accompanied him, each requiring food, clothing, and sometimes wages. These men were not decorative. They were necessary for survival, for care of animals, for transport of equipment, and for the maintenance of status. A knight without attendants appeared diminished, his authority weakened. Yet each additional man multiplied the cost of movement, lodging, and supply. Campaigns, which popular memory treats as opportunities for glory and loot, were more often financial disasters. Many knights were required to serve at their own expense, obligated by feudal duty to appear for a set number of days each year without guaranteed compensation. Even when wages were promised, they were frequently delayed or reduced. Kings and lords struggled to finance prolonged wars, and payment arrears were common. Surviving records from England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire show knights petitioning for back pay years after campaigns ended, often unsuccessfully. Ransom, the romanticized reward of chivalric warfare, was unreliable and dangerous. Capturing a noble enemy did not guarantee payment, and negotiations could drag on indefinitely. Meanwhile, the knight bore the cost of guarding his prisoner, feeding him, and sometimes houses him honorably, all while waiting for money that might never arrive. For every celebrated ransom that enriched a family, there were countless failed attempts that left knights deeper in debt than before. At home, the economic pressure did not pause. A knight's estate, if he possessed one, required constant management. Land had to be worked, tenants supervised, buildings repaired, boundaries defended. Absence on campaign often meant neglect, and neglect meant loss. Crops failed, tenants left, rivals encroached. Legal disputes multiplied, and legal disputes were expensive. Medieval courts did not favor the absent. A knight away at war risked returning to find his income diminished, his rights challenged, and his authority weakened. The household itself was a site of ongoing expense. A knight's family was expected to live according to their rank, even when income failed to match expectations. Clothing, food, religious donations, hospitality, and social obligations consumed resources steadily. Wives of knights often acted as estate managers in their husband's absence, but they did so under intense pressure, blamed for failures they could not prevent and constrained by limited authority. Daughters required dowries. Sons required training, equipment, and introductions if they were to follow the same path. Each generation inherited not only land and name, but debt. The idea that knighthood guaranteed wealth is contradicted by the sheer volume of evidence showing knights mortgaging property, selling future harvests, or entering unfavorable marriages to stabilize finances. Many lesser knights, those without large estates, lived perpetually on the edge of ruin, sustained more by reputation than by solvency. The code of chivalry, often imagined as a moral refuge, intensified these pressures rather than alleviating them. A knight was expected to be generous, to host feasts, to give gifts, to support religious institutions, to ransom comrades, and to display largesse in public. Miserliness damaged honor. Prudence was easily mistaken for weakness. Refusing to spend could be as socially dangerous as failing to fight. Thus, knights were pushed toward financial behavior that modern observers would recognize as unsustainable. Debt was not shameful in itself, but insolvency was. And insolvency was common. The emotional cost of this condition is rarely addressed. A knight lived with constant awareness that a single loss of a horse, a suit of armor, a lawsuit, an illness could unravel years of effort. Injury was not only a physical threat, but an economic one. A wounded knight, unable to ride or fight, lost his primary means of income and relevance. There were no pensions, no reliable systems of care. Some turned to monasteries. Others faded into obscurity, their titles intact, but their means gone. The families of such men bore the consequences quietly. Wives managed shrinking resources. Children adjusted expectations downward. The language of medieval letters and wills reveals anxiety, fear, and a preoccupation with debt that sits uneasily beside the heroic narratives Later centuries preferred to remember. Even victory carried cost. Triumph demanded display. Returning from campaign required renewed investment in appearance, in celebration, in the visible markers of success. Failure to perform success publicly risked undermining whatever advantage had been gained privately. Thus, the cycle continued. Spend to appear worthy, borrow to maintain standing, fight to recover losses, and hope that fortune would intervene before obligations exceeded endurance. For a small number, it did. For many, it did not. Knighthood was not a stable profession, but a precarious balancing act, sustained by belief, pressure, and the fear of falling out of one's assigned place in the social order. It demanded not only courage, but continuous sacrifice, much of it invisible, much of it borne by families whose names history did not preserve. The medieval knight did not simply risk his life, he risked his future, his household, and his lineage on a system that promised honor, but rarely guaranteed security. When stripped of romance, knighthood appears not as a path to glory, but as a costly commitment to an identity that consumed wealth as readily as it consumed bodies. And perhaps this is the truest measure of its price. Not the armor, the horses, or the debts recorded in account books, but the quiet erosion of stability, endured in pursuit of an ideal that demanded everything and repaid only a few. If tonight's journey brought you a moment of calm or a spark of curiosity, you're always welcome to wander these stories again. There will be more tales waiting here, quiet histories, forgotten paths, and gentle echoes from the past. Whenever your evening calls for a peaceful escape, you know where to find me. Rest well, traveler.